There is perhaps no greater part of the human experience than the contemplation of one's own legacy. How will I be remembered? Will I be remembered? Most importantly, did I leave an impact, whether good or bad? It's a discussion that comes up at least at one point in one's own life, and in the age of social media, now more than ever, the actions one makes in their time on this pale blue dot will be documented for years to come. It's an enormous responsibility, as well as a huge ask for many people. Be the best you that you can be, while also acknowledging that what you do matters to somebody, whether it's someone in your family to someone all the way across the globe in a town you may not even be able to pronounce. And I believe no one understands the gravity of that responsibility than superheroes. While fictional, of course, the creators of these larger-than-life icons understand that fiction can sometimes help dictate reality. As children, we learn the difference between good and evil from the bright and colorful characters that we watch and read on Saturday mornings. And as we grow older, we absorb the lessons and morals these characters and artists infuse in their creations in order to shape the people that we want to be. Sometimes people take their inspirations and make themselves pillars of communities and fight for injustices or creativity. But sometimes people take away the wrong messages from these characters and use these creations to help divide people further. Despite what people say, entertainment is important, a fact that I've made great efforts to highlight on my channel since my One Marvelous Scene video. And while I can understand the frustration to the film community around it, there is a reason that superheroes are dominating the cultural zeitgeist. Even in a subversive execution like The Boys or Invincible, people look to these Herculean icons and love to vicariously see themselves inside of these characters. In some way, they see themselves as people capable of fighting the world's problems, dismantling the system that builds up these false idols. When people watch these characters, whether on the big or small screen, or even reading on the page, they believe they can make a difference, that they can leave a legacy behind. Which brings me to DC Comics and the discussion of legacy characters. There are definitive rules in the pop culture landscape that apply to certain icons and symbols. Batman will always be a dark avenger who strikes fear into the hearts of criminals everywhere. Superman will always be a beacon of hope that acts as a vision for what we could all strive to be. And Wonder Woman will always be a worldly yet motherly figure that exemplifies the strength and beauty of femininity. But yet, while there are certainly names associated with the symbols attached to them, such as Bruce Wayne or Clark Kent or Hal Jordan, think of how many Batmen, Supermen, and Green Lanterns there's been over the years. It sounds insane, and could potentially run the gambit of confusing audiences and readers everywhere, but I've never seen it like that. For me, the mark of an iconic character is not in who wears the symbol, but always in the impact the symbol has on the world around them. As Stan Lee put it in the creation of perhaps his most iconic character he's ever made, he made it so that way anyone could see themselves behind the mask. There's a lot to love about the comics giant, even when taking their many mistakes into consideration. As such, with the help of the good folks at the website that I help run, Renegade Pop Culture, we decided to do a special YouTube event on the anniversary of DC Comics' inception, where we can all gush about the things that make them so special. Whether it's film, TV, cartoons, video games, or the comics they're based on, no feat is too small and no good deed goes overlooked. If you want to join, just reach out to me on Twitter and let's unite together. Because this is DC Defined. But first, I want to show you guys something real quick.
From 30,000 feet above the desert floor, I see it there below. A city with a legend, the West Texas city of El Paso, where long ago I heard a song about a Texas cowboy and a girl, and a little place called Roses where he used to go and watch this beauty world.
This is my hometown of El Paso, Texas. I always like to call it a small town trying to be a big city. It's not as big or as sprawling as Dallas, or as famous as Austin, or even as fun or considered a party city like Corpus Christi. You're not about to hear any Keep El Paso weird kind of sayings here. But I've always found some sort of beauty in this city due to the fact that it's what I've always envisioned America to be. At the end of the day, our country was founded on the belief of collecting people of different cultures to come together and build one unifying community. And that's definitely El Paso to its bedrock. Wherever you go, you see a bleeding of two different cultures into one city, to the point where the Rio Grande border just blurs between El Paso and Mexico. It's certainly a far cry from the hellscape that most films and TV shows portray us as. Fans of Breaking Bad and Denis Villeneuve's Sicario may recall that El Paso is almost always portrayed as the gateway to the hellscape that is Juarez, Mexico. A place where gang violence is seen everywhere you go, with dead bodies and drugs painting the streets red with blood and white with coke. But of course, people who have actually seen this side of the country know that it isn't true in the slightest. While it is true that corruption and cartel violence is still a big problem in Mexico, it certainly isn't at the height that it once was in the early 2000s or in the early 2010s. And the twin cities of El Paso and Juarez are just as beautiful as any of the more developed sides of Texas and Mexico, respectively. Not only that, but to the surprise of many El Pasoans and U.S. citizens, the city of El Paso has been voted across the entire United States as one of the safest cities in America multiple times over the course of the 20th century onwards. But yet, there's rarely been a positive spotlight that's been shown upon the Hispanic, or if you prefer the term, the Latinx or the Chicano community. In this town, unless it involves UTEP or sports, there's rarely ever been a positive role model that's broken through by and large to show the world the beauty and heart that our city has to offer. Sure, there's famous actors and singers that have emerged from the Sun City, such as Alan Tudyk, Debbie Reynolds, Stevie Nicks, or even Khalid, who, fun fact, I actually went to high school with. And hell, Marty Robbins is practically baked into the bedrock of El Paso, as he's got like 3 songs about us, has streets and a community center named after him, as well as his song Felina actually being our local college's fight song. But none have become pop culture figures that have made names for themselves on a broader level. For the most part, what's broken out from our city as well as our people have been typical cultural stereotypes that feel like they've walked off the set of Blood In, Blood Out. Cholos with wife beaters and lowriders who act hood tough and have a heart of gold. Which, it's a part of our culture, but when gangsters and drug dealers and hoods are all you've been given as far as representation, it can be pretty demoralizing for how the rest of the world sees you as. But all that changed for me on one faithful day, on March 25th of 2012. Back then, there was a certain website that was run by a certain content creator with glasses that recruited a large group of content creators. And there was one in particular that I really loved watching. His name was Eric Rodriguez, also known as the Blockbuster Buster. And on that fateful day, he uploaded a video that counted down the top 10 Hispanic heroes. And it was his number 8 entry that introduced me to my favorite fictional character of all time, Jaime Reyes, aka the Blue Beetle. The Blue Beetle was, by all intents and purposes, a legacy character that was never meant to take off as much as he did. Initially, the person that donned the scarab was a police officer named Dan Garrett in the 1940s, which eventually gave way to a career as a swashbuckling archaeologist akin to Indiana Jones when he was published by Charleston Comics. The creator behind the Blue Bastion of Bravery is certainly a contentious one, as while they are credited as being done by Charles Nicholas, it's actually a pseudonym widely attributed to 3 titans in the comic creating community in the mid-20th century. Chuck Caldera, who claimed to be the sole creator, but there's serious contention on that front from comic historians. Charles Nicholas Wachowski, who most historians credit as the real creator of the Blue Beetle, and Jack Kirby. Yes, that Jack Kirby. And even to an extent, Will Eisner was credited as the scripter for Blue Beetle's first appearance in Mystery Men Comics number 1 in 1939. There was so much early talent on display for a character that, to be honest, was already seen as a blatant ripoff of the Green Hornet. As time went on, and the comics evolved from newsprint stories to full-on paper rags sold in the stores, he took on the persona of a swashbuckling superhero, more akin to the Phantom more than anything. But there was a pulpy fun that was tangible with the charm of the character, that despite the artistic inconsistencies with each appearance Dan Garrett blessed readers with, such as an ever-revolving door of costume design changes to even facial features, nevertheless endeared him for years to come with readers. But still, as time went on, cultural shifts in entertainment necessitated a new incarnation of the Blue Beetle to be brought to the funny pages. Enter probably the second most well-known version of the character, Ted Kord. Created by Steve Ditko, fresh off of his stint at the New York offices of Marvel, the Blue Beetle wasn't a globe-trotting adventurer fighting supernatural creatures with larger-than-life powers that made him a living god, but rather an incredibly gifted scientist and acrobat, because it's Steve Ditko. And of course his character is an acrobat, a man whose brains and wit can get him out of any crisis thrown his way. He was revealed to be a former student of Garrett's and went with him to take care of some personal issues, and after he passes on saving Kord's life, he swears from that point on to take on the mantle of his mentor, to honor Dan Garrett's memory and prove that his death wasn't in vain. The choice to not give him powers was an interesting one that Ditko himself championed for. He didn't want to do a powered hero in his comics. Kord went on for many years as the de facto Blue Beetle, and after Charleston Comics was liquidated into DC back in the 1980s, he was introduced into the universe thanks to the famous Crisis on Infinite Earths storyline. From there, he was given a solo series by Len Wein, the creator of Swamp Thing, and was a regular member on the Justice League International series written by Keith Geffen. More on him later. Ted Kord was a beloved character to some, with his bathos and camaraderie with Booster Gold being a constant highlight, and it would prove to be a bromance that would carry on for decades, even now. There's 2 facts to know about Ted Kord, one that's kind of important and one that's not so important but still pretty interesting. First, when Alan Moore was first conceptualizing Watchmen, He originally wanted the story to be centered around the Charleston characters that DC had just purchased, but the publisher decided against such an idea because they had plans for them. As such, the Question, another Ditko creation, became Rorschach, Peacemaker, yes, that Peacemaker, became the Comedian, and Blue Beetle became Night Owl. With even the similarities between Dan Dreiberg looking up to Hollis Mason being a direct parallel to Ted Kord looking up to Dan Garrett. And two, when Ted Kord was going to appear in Mark Waid and Alex Ross's critically acclaimed story Kingdom Come, Ross was inspired by Marvel's Iron Man, and as such gave Kord a lean technological visual upgrade to make him feel like a robot. Something that would come into play later. I bring all this up because Ted Kord was for the longest time the only Blue Beetle readers were used to for over 4 decades. But all that would change on March 30th of 2005 in Countdown to Infinite Crisis. Written by Jeff Johns, Greg Rucka, and Judd Winnick, Ted Kord is brushed off by a majority of the Justice League when he uncovers a mysterious plot that bankrupts him and potentially puts his friends and loved ones in danger. When he uncovers the truth behind everything, that Maxwell Lord, a big bad played brilliantly by Pedro Pascal in Wonder Woman 84, has effectively taken control of the Justice League's all-seeing security system Brother Eye, he tries to take him down on his own with no help from the others. And he fails. And when Lord offers Ted one last chance to join alongside him, Kord says point blank,
"Rotten hell, Max."
And with that, the legacy of Ted Kord was now over. But as the event went on, so did the legacy of the Blue Beetle, as the Scarab, thanks to the help of the wizard Shazam, was launched across the globe and found itself in El Paso, Texas, where young Jaime Reyes would pick it up, and his life would be changed forever. Jaime Reyes' Blue Beetle was created by the team of Keith Geffen and John Rogers, with Cully Hamner picking up pencils. It follows Jaime after the events of Infinite Crisis, who has been gone for an entire year, even though to him, he was only gone for an entire night. With his family and friends fearing that he was long since dead, life went on and had taken its toll in many different ways. His best friend, Brenda Del Vecchio, a young girl with snark that cuts like a knife, suffered from her abusive father after police questioned her with Jaime's disappearance, only for him to die from a DUI. Paco, a boy whose heart and size are bigger than his brains, joined a metahuman gang called the Posse, which helps metahumans from Mexico make their way to the US. And Jaime's own father, Alberto Reyes, the owner of an oil change gas station joint, got caught up in the struggles of one of his deadbeat co-workers and got shot in the leg, thereby becoming crippled forever. As Jaime grapples with everything that has come to pass since he was last left on Earth, he also learns of the Blue Beetle through many colorful characters, such as Booster Gold, Guy Gardner, aka no one's favorite Green Lantern, except for maybe mine, Dan Garrett's granddaughter Danielle, and even Christopher Smith himself, Peacemaker, which I think is a really nice nod to the Charleston origins of the character. Unlike Ted Kord, Jaime Reyes actually does have a damn near infinite amount of powers due to the Scarab infusing itself into his spine, and provides him with an endoskeleton that acts as armor, as well as a very well-armed arsenal of energy cannons, shields, blades, and whatever the hell else a battle would call for. The endoskeleton itself is actually very heavily inspired off of Alex Ross's designs for Ted Kord back in Kingdom Come, and according to Cully Hamner, and a nice little bit of cultural inspiration, was also heavily based on the designs of luchador wrestlers in Mexico. Surprisingly, Jaime's managed to endure over the course of the 21st century. becoming probably the most well-known incarnation of the Blue Beetle. Now, this could be due to him being the most recent version of the character, and I'm not about to make the claim that the Blue Beetle won't be completely reinvented in decades to come. But to deny the impact that Jaime has had on the DC universe since his debut in Infinite Crisis is insanity. He stayed on in the pages of New 52 in his own series written by Tony Bedard and drawn by Ig Gorata, which was certainly a run, as well as being brought back to life in the rebirth phase of DC, with Keith Geffen returning to pen Jaime being teamed up now with Ted Kord, who is not dead. Don't ask, it gets complicated. Hell, even outside of comics, he's had appearances in animated DC projects, being a recurring character in Batman the Brave and the Bold, Young Justice, and Justice League Action. In live action, he's appeared in Smallville's 10th and blessedly final season in the episode titled Booster, where my boy Jaron Brand Bartlett does his best job as my man from El Paso, despite looking like a knockoff Power Rangers villain they'd happily mop the floor with in a Monster of the Week episode. And to look no further, you can even play as him in Lego Batman 3 and Injustice 2. So if you ever wondered the age-old question of who would win in a fight, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or a kid from El Paso, Texas, you're in luck, and you can thank Ed Boon for that.
You and me, we're basically both noobs.
Dude, I could beat gaming.
Now, I've talked at length about each of the Blue Beetles at this point, but how does Blue Beetle as a character define DC? What sets him apart from the shining beacon of truth, justice, and a better world, or the living embodiment of vengeance? How does a character who started life as a shameless ripoff of the Green Hornet in the 40s, only to later be seen as derivative of Iron Man, to even now being seen as DC's answer to Spider-Man, get seen as the best of the best compared to literal icons that have left big stamps in the cultural zeitgeist? What makes Blue Beetle so special? Well, if we're talking strictly comics, the thing that I think sets him apart from not only the rest of the DC pantheon, but also the competition of Marvel and even Image Comics, is just how subversive Jaime is as an entity, especially in his early run. You have to understand that it is true that a lot of Blue Beetle is a pastiche of various comic tropes. The teenage superhero who juggles a double life, a man who has an alien parasite living inside of him that wants to kill everything it sees, a living nuke that can be seen as more machine than man. Now be honest with me. From that vague description alone, was the first person that popped into your mind Blue Beetle? I'm almost positive it wasn't, and I can prove it because I easily thought of 4 different characters that could apply to as I was writing this sentence. But what makes Jaime such an interesting character is also what sets him apart from not only the other DC characters, but also most comic book characters too. His empathy and his openness. Unlike Batman, who keeps his secret life close to the chest and barely lets most people in, Jaime immediately involves his family and friends, mostly to explain where he's been in the year he was away. Unlike Spider-Man, who views his gifts and eventual symbiotic bond as a flaw and wants desperately to be normal or rid of the responsibility, Jaime learns to embrace his intergalactic burden and have it become a natural extension of himself. There's not even any dumb love triangle bullshit like with any other series or story where you have 2 teenage boys and 1 teenage girl, which I can't tell you how much of a breath of fresh air it is. As long as you don't read the New 52 version, but that's neither here nor there. Even whenever he veers into the standard superhero fare of becoming overwhelmed with guilt or self-loathing, he's got a wonderful support system to build him up. From Paco and Brenda, his parents and annoying younger sister, to even his girlfriend Tracy 13 and other superheroes. He was gonna let me work summer hours. That's it. If I hadn't disappeared, maybe he'd have fired Luis.
Nuh-uh. No way are you taking this on.
Brenda's right, bro.
Wait, I'm right?
A lot of stuff went off the rails when you disappeared, yeah?
Paco, you're not helping.
No, not what I meant.
Brenda, tell me the stuff with your family.
Jaime.
It started because you got hauled in by the cops when I disappeared, right? Paco, tell me you didn't start ganging when me and Brenda were gone.
Listen, I'm not the smartest guy here, but I gotta think your family's freaking because stuff just happening at random, stuff that's nobody's fault, that's just too scary for some people. But I know life just punches you on the neck sometimes, and when all that was going down, I wasn't thinking Jaime's gone and he's screwing us over. I was thinking Jaime's gone, and that sucks. 'Cause he always knows how to make everybody feel better.
Even his villains aren't the typical superpowered cliches of madmen with flashy powers and even flashier costumes, but rather are initially a group of superpowered kids who made questionable choices in their lives and are just trying to make a living. A mafia boss who happens to be Brenda's aunt, and an alien general that is directly related to the Scarab. Yeah, on Brenda's aunt, Amparo del Vecchio, she's actually a mob boss that goes by the alias La Dama, who tries to farm a bunch of disenfranchised metahuman teens from the border in order to fund her own private army, but doing so through empathetic means. And worse yet, she knows Jaime is Blue Beetle. It's also here that Jaime puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that Brenda's father wasn't killed in a DUI, but rather had a hit put on him, orchestrated by Amparo in order to get Brenda out of an abusive household after he put her in the hospital. She is by all intents and purposes Jaime's arch enemy, a fact pointed out by Paco himself in the comic. But with all of these villains, the interesting thing is that he often works with them either to help keep the peace or understands that even bad guys have some good underneath. I don't know anything about being a superhero. She's a baby. I'm not letting anybody hurt a baby. But that's just looking at it from a comics perspective. What makes Jaime so subversive is also just how different he is from his other incarnations. In the Geffen Rogers run, Jaime is fresh off the death of Ted Kord, and Dan Garrett has long since been buried 6 feet under. As such, Jaime makes it a point to study the exploits as well as the techniques of each prior Beetle. In Ted Kord, he learns how to be intuitive and think on his feet when it comes to his own intelligence and quick wits. And in Dan Garrett, he learns how to carry himself as a hero with self-confidence as well as cunning due to being the only other person with powers. In turn, he becomes a better hero by honoring the legacy of both of these men, as well as becomes his own man by the end of the run. Still, the differences aren't just surface level. Another big difference between Jaime, Ted, and Dan is how each of them stands out. Dan Garrett is a pulp machine through and through, and if there's anything that sets him apart from the rest, it's his bravado. He was quite literally a Superman in the same way as Indiana Jones or James Bond was, just that he could fly and he had super strength. And yet, he always kept moving forward no matter how badly the odds were stacked against him, and even in death, went out swinging. Ted Kord was just a man, even more so than Jaime, who still had the burden of powers bestowed on him. But what made Ted special was his morals, his resilience. After all, his creator Steve Ditko was an objectivist and had a stern belief in right and wrong with no gray in between. And even though Ted was often underpowered compared to the colleagues he'd work alongside with, he still kept his head in the game, and he died as he lived, trying to do the right thing, even when people didn't take him seriously. Jaime is a totally different beast entirely. He's still a kid at the end of the day who had an entire year taken away from him, even if he didn't realize it. The start of his character motivation is when he first tells his family of the Scarab and what he had been up to in the night/year he had been gone. And they responded with overwhelming fear, his kid sister Milagro afraid to even look him in the eye, and his mother Bianca venomously shouting at the armored Blue Beetle that he isn't her son. From there, Jaime does his hardest to make sure that no one needs to feel alienated or abandoned or lost for as long as he has his powers. And he succeeds for most of his 2006 run. It's why he helps out the posse, even though they're technically hoods and gangsters. It's why he invites his friends and family into his superhero escapades. And it's why he keeps fighting the Scarab's instincts to kill when it talks to him. Because the thing that sets Jaime apart from the rest of the Beetles is his empathy. And if you need further proof, look no further than issue number 17. In this issue, David Drake, also known as Typhoon, wreaks havoc on the Yucatan coast of Mexico and starts making, well, a typhoon in town. See, at this point, Jaime hasn't had to deal with any major roadblocks in his journey as a superhero. He's been traumatized for sure and had to deal with life or death situations, but he's never really been tested when it comes to the lives of others. Up until now, Jaime has been quipping, having fun with, and being confused with the flashiness of superhero work, and has even patched things up with his family after they go with him to where he crashed back into Earth. But in the background of these 17 issues, the shadow of Ted Kort's death looms high over Jaime and his friends. And while he's not had a serious brush with death, eventually he'd have to deal with it in some way. So, Typhoon starts causing trouble, and Kajida, the scarab inside him, starts counting down. People he rescued and sent to a hotel chain in Mexico were being forced out of the building and were starting to dwindle down. As the number of lives starts to drop sharply, Jaime nearly breaks down, but then picks himself up and with the help of the scarab's near infinite powers, calls the owner of the hotel chain and convinces him to house the civilians while Jaime fights Typhoon. And who's the owner? With the civilians saved, Jaime focuses all of his rage, all of his hate, all of his anger on Typhoon. It's the only time in the whole series up until this point where Jaime wants to unleash everything the Scarab is capable of on the monster who killed people on his watch. But he stops himself just before he goes further. Later that night, after saving the rest of the town, his father walks into his room and finds Jaime huddled up in the corner. And while Alberto's proud of his son, Jaime beats himself up. He says what I'm almost positive you've heard any other superhero say in their lowest point. I should have saved them all. If I was really a hero, I should have saved them all. And what does Alberto do? He grabs his son by the shoulders, looks him in the eyes, and says,
I was in combat, Jaime, not much older than you, and I commanded my friends and lost, like you. It will happen again, and you will come home to us, and I will tell you how you are a good man again, always.
In many ways, this is as much a defining moment for Jaime as a hero as it is for him as a man. His shift from wacky fun times to recognizing the true weight of responsibility that rests inside his spine, it's the point he grows up. But it's also one of the things that I think defines DC heroes at the end of the day. The weight of humanity and having the empathy to carry on and still fight, no matter how hard it is. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, everyone carries the weight of the people they've lost in their eternal war against injustice and crime. Each superhero has struggled with their own limitations. But Jaime exemplifies what it means to embrace those limitations and to learn to share the weight with the people around him. Like Bats with his ever-sprawling family of cave-hanging crime fighters, or Superman with Lois Lane, or even using a more contemporary and recent example, like Cyborg and his family and the League in Zack Snyder's Justice League, or Bloodsport and Ratcatcher 2 with the Squad in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. The road to heroism is hard to walk alone. But Jaime is never alone, and that's what makes his journey so damn impactful. If you're not me, that is. I hope I've done an okay enough job explaining just how special Jaime Reyes and the Blue Beetle are in the world of comics, as well as the broader DC universe, but, I mean, like I said earlier, Jaime Reyes is my favorite fictional character of all time. I mean, I literally own all of his storylines pre-New 52 and post-Rebirth, and on top of that, I've even written a screenplay that I want to pitch to Warner Brothers if I ever get a chance to get my foot in the door. But what is it about him that resonates so well in me? Well, I mean, I'm not trying to sound egotistical or anything, but I literally see me in Blue Beetle. And I don't mean in the way that Stan Lee originally envisioned with how people see themselves in Spider-Man. I mean, I literally see myself in Jaime Reyes. As mentioned before, I'm an El Pasoan, born and raised. Likewise, I mentioned in my One Excellent Scene video that I was adopted into my family, and it's through them that I learned that blood doesn't run thicker than water. And as a comic book fan, I'll admit to being a basic bitch back then, because for a long time, my personal favorite comic book character was Batman. And that was mostly due to the gritty and hard-boiled writing of Frank Miller through his run on Daredevil, as well as Sin City being a major influence on me. But as I got older, I started to move away from the more cynical and admittingly dour sensibilities that had shaped me throughout my middle school and early high school life. I started to open myself up more to not only optimistic and sincere films and works of art, but also to my own hometown and heritage. But I've always wondered, was there a character for me? And in the back of my mind, in senior year of high school, that's when I remembered the Blockbuster Busters video on the top 10 Hispanic heroes. And I finally started reading Blue Beetle. As I read through the first issue of Geffen, Rogers, and Hamner's Blue Beetle, I had the biggest smile on my face seeing Jaime fight a Green Lantern in the outskirts of El Paso, as well as seeing a Big 8 sign on the back of a truck. As I read, I got a kick out of seeing the kind of snarky but not too quippy relationship of Jaime's family, as well as the not too in-your-face subtext that Jaime was adopted into his family. I adored the empathy that Jaime displays as a hero and how no matter what, he always wanted to save people's lives, no matter how sadistic they are, or even how damaging they can be to Jaime's personal life. Paco and Brenda were my friends as much as Jaime's. I saw my closest friends I had walked home with from high school every summer vacation on the page. Above all else, I saw a blending of culture that never once reduced my hometown, the people I see outside my window, in the halls of my high school, in the streets of my town, to all the way across the Rio Grande border on the streets of Juarez onwards, as mere Mexican stereotypes. For Christ's sake, there's literally an entire issue told in Spanish about Jaime taking his girlfriend Tracy 13 to a family get-together in Mexico. It is absolutely wild to me that a character that's been around for over 80 years could create such an impact, and likewise that they resonate so well with people all over the world. The fact that people rejoiced when Jaime Reyes was playable in Injustice 2 just makes my heart soar. And the fact that people are going to experience my favorite character on HBO Max real soon has me unbelievably melancholic. mostly because it's not going to be in theaters, and likewise because I'm not going to be able to make it. But soon people are going to see what I love in the character on a broader level. And a large part of that is just how Jaime exemplifies the best of DC by being the best of El Paso. He's not from Gotham City or Metropolis, Central City, or any other big real-life city like New York or Detroit or Los Angeles, but El Paso, Texas. A small town trying to be a big city, sticking up for the little guy, defending essentially 3 cities and 2 countries at once. And just like El Paso, Jaime is the perfect melting pot of all the different pillars of DC. He wears his heart on his sleeve, just like Superman. He cares for all life, no matter how big or small, like Wonder Woman. He's dealt with trauma and tragedy at the hands of a meaningless crime, much like Batman. He keeps moving forward and tries to smile through everything, just like the Flash. And he's never too serious to laugh at the absurdity of it all, like the Teen Titans. He is, at his core, a good man whose legacy can be felt not just in the world of comics, but even the very town that he found his inspiration from. An icon who stands tall in a universe full of legendary icons. And what is that? But DC defined.
So you're still thinking of me, just like I know you should. I cannot give you everything, you know I wish I could. I'm so high at the moment, I'm so caught up in this. Yeah, we're just young, dumb, and broke, but we still got love to give while we're young, dumb. Young, dumb, and broke. Young, dumb, dumb, and broke. Young, dumb, dumb, and broke. Young, dumb, broke high school kid. Young, dumb, broke high school kid. We have so much in common.
Well, it's been a whole week of non-stop editing, but it's finally done. Special shout out to everybody in the DC Defined playlist. Seriously, you guys fucking killed it. The videos are amazing. I'm so proud of each and every one of you. We really did make this a reality. If you're watching out there, please check out the link in the description below. Give everybody some much needed love. They work their asses off and they're amazing videos. Also go check out renegadepopculture.com. We did sponsor the whole DC Defined thing. We got reviews and podcasts, the works. And special shout out to Gwendolyn J. Stone for helping out with the inspiration for this. I tell you, I've always wanted to make this video, and I'm glad that it's finally out there. It's been a busy month on this channel, 2 40-minute plus videos. I'm incredibly beat, guys, so I'm going to take a little break before the next video. So until next time, take care, stay safe.
Young, dumb, broke high school kids.